Okay, we'll start. So this week's Sedra is the third Sedra in the fourth of the Chumash, Behaalotecha, and we're going to do a few things that are a bit more difficult, and if some parts of it bore you, just cruise for a minute or two. But I'll just remind everybody of the statement by the Baal Shem Tov that if the teacher is teaching it again, he didn't do a proper job before, and if you're listening to it again, you didn't learn it properly before. So if I'm covering stuff that you already know, that's good for both of us. Now, it's common vocabulary with us that there are always two levels to reality as we know it. There's that part of reality which is revealed, and there's that part of reality that's concealed. And whether it's day and night, whether it's awake or asleep, and when Hashem creates a reality and continues to recreate that reality, we have an understanding that because it's the wisdom of Hashem, it's going to be true all the time and invariably true all the time. So if you have a concept of revelation and concealment, that concept is going to be a constant all the time throughout your life in every aspect where you look for it. And one of the logical questions that intelligent people are going to always be asking themselves is, if you learn a piece of Torah and it's apparently totally irrelevant to you, and I'll take an example in a moment, but say it's completely irrelevant to you. It's unperformable and irrelevant. So what's the good of it? Why are we obliged to learn that Torah and seek to perform any mitzvahs which are connected with our learning when it's just completely impossible or inappropriate? And I keep going through with whoever's here or listening on the tape that if the person is a pseudo-intellectual or likes to learn at a very mean level because he can't do any better, he's going to tell you that there's something wrong with the Torah. The Torah's, or he will find fault with the Torah. That's a very poor and an impoverished perspective. And what we're going to learn tonight is a couple of things which are apparently totally irrelevant and yet are so fundamentally important that your very life depends on it. So and before I begin that, I want to explain another thing, that together with the concept of revelation and concealment, one of the truths that we live with, to the point, and it's so commonplace that we almost don't recognize it without focusing on it, are the energies that exist in the world. Now, there are two kinds of energies, like everything else, revealed and concealed. The revealed energies are physical energies, combustion, friction, all the things that we all learned in baby school, that these are energies that are physically apparent to us. But then we have energies which are spiritual energies, and they are concealed, and they are not only as important but maybe more important. We don't have a measurement for them, so you can't make a statement about more important or less important. But can I trouble somebody? I don't think anyone's coming anymore. Can we close the door? Thank you very much. Someone's gone. It's just that it's bitingly cold outside, cozy in here. So, and if you want to go to sleep, you need it to be cozy. So, these energies that are concealed are spiritual energies, and they're not measurable, and skeptics will deny them. The skeptics will tell you they don't exist. For example, I'll give you a mad example. My niece was married for some years and couldn't have children. My father-in-law was funding she lives in America, in New York. If I could tell you what the IVF program costs in New York, you just wouldn't believe the amount of money. And he was supporting her for doing this for some years, and she didn't fall pregnant, never. My in-laws were not observant, but my father-in-law was very clever, and once when he was in New York, he yielded to family pressure, and he went to the river and for dollars. And when he went to the Rebbe for dollars, he was very impressed because the Rebbe said, here's $1 for tzedakah, and here's $1 because you're Australian. And even my father-in-law didn't understand how he knew that he was Australian. There was no introductions there. Rabbi Leder will tell you that there was a line of 5,000 people that went all the way around.
He had no accent. He didn't have a Australian accent.
And he had a Hungarian accent, a strong Hungarian accent. So the Rebbe gave him the $2. So anyway, 100 years went past, and about 2 years before he died, when he'd been helping my niece with this IVF program for a long period of time, I'm spending too long on this, I'm just trying to give you an example. He suddenly had an idea that he would send what were the good of the $2 for him anymore? So he found them in the bottom of a drawer, and he sent the $2 to my niece, explaining that they were the Rebbe's dollars. My niece doesn't keep anything, so she didn't then. So she got the $2, had twins. Without IVF, without any.
For $4.
Huh?
Get quadruplets.
So, if you questioned most people on that, they'd say it's a remarkable coincidence, right? A remarkable coincidence means that you're denying the spiritual energy of the $2. Can you see a spiritual energy in the $2? Can you measure this? You can't. You can't see it. You can't measure it. So we have various energies which are very powerful spiritual energies, which most people don't tap into, but everybody here, we've been learning enough for long enough together to understand that some of them are become obvious to us. The Rebbe's Torah, or Chabad Hasidus, then you become aware of the power of some of these energies. For example, we learn, as a matter of nigla, it's a matter of revealed Torah, that if you give tzedakah, God pays you back. And no baloney, not in health and kisses and hugs and girlfriends, and he pays you back in money. You give money, you get back money. And it's a mitzvah, it's the only mitzvah where you're allowed to test God in this. The Rebbe took this to the point where when somebody was short of money, one of the things he recommended on various occasions, we've learned it in the Igris together, that the person calculates the profit he was going to make on something that didn't happen and left him complaining to the Rebbe about his financial circumstance, and he should give that amount in tzedakah, and and sit back. Now, if his betoken is strong enough, we have many, many instances of how that money was regenerated as a result of that. Where does that come from? This is a spiritual energy. There is an energy in tzedakah. There's an energy in emunah, in faith, in trust. You trust, the more you trust, the more it's likely to, that trust to be vindicated. It becomes a matter of degree. It becomes a matter of how serious your trust is and whether you're playing a game or whether you're really seriously there. Now, one of those, I'm going to talk about two energies tonight in particular, one more briefly than the other. Let's start with the first one, which is this, that speech carries with it a creative and destructive force. Speech, ordinary speech. Ordinary speech can build and ordinary speech can tear down. When we have prohibitions of what's called lashon hara, and lashon hara means that you're speaking badly about somebody else. Now, so that it's clear between us what we're talking about, to isolate how powerful this force is. When you speak lashon hara, you're speaking the truth. It's not that you're lying about somebody. Let me define it. Lashon hara means speaking badly about somebody else, either behind their back or in front of them, in company, in front of them in company. Right? You're speaking about something bad about somebody to somebody else, and to understand the problem, I need to explain again, explain this again, that when you speak lashon hara, the lashon hara is true. It's not that you're lying about somebody. You're not libeling somebody with a lie. That's a different offense altogether called motzi shem ra. But lashon hara, you're telling somebody the truth. So Chaim Yankel is a thief, or Chaim Yankel has done this wrong, Chaim Yankel has done that wrong. There are exceptions to these rules, because if you need a reference for business or a shidduch or something, you have to tell the truth. But to volunteer a piece of bad news or description about somebody is an offense. It is one of the averos. It's one of the negative mitzvahs in the Torah that you're not allowed to do, and that carries with it an energy, and the energy that it carries with it is that it realizes, it focuses into revealed reality, something which was concealed before, and by accessing that. So, before we go there, let's take some simple examples of the power of speech. First of all, the whole of creation, you know, when you read Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim ve'es that God created the heaven and the earth. How did he do it? Vayomer Hashem, Hashem said, Yehi oya, and there was light. He spoke, and that created. What is that code for? That's code for the fact that this is an energy given to humanity as an incredible gift, and it's got to be nursed and cared for and kept very, very carefully. And you can bring up children in a house, in a home. You can build up children in a house where there's negative speech, or you can bring them up in a home as opposed to a house where there's positive speech. And if there's positive speech, you'll build that child, and you'll build his self-esteem. If there's negative speech, you'll tear him to pieces. He'll grow up to be like half of the lunatics that are running around in our streets as we see it. But the very fact that the speech has a positive value or a negative value comes from an examination of a revealed or concealed energy. So the Torah tells the following story, that Am Yisrael complained a lot, and we won't have time to go through all the examples, but there were lots of complaints about. Just let's talk about the mon very quickly. Everybody knows that Hashem gave the mon and it could taste of whatever you wanted. You wanted fillet steak, it tasted like fillet steak. You wanted ice cream, it tasted like ice cream, but it looked like cotton wool, and everybody knows that food's got to look good as well. In fact, the Gemara says that a blind person can't really enjoy food. So they complained, and there were many instances in the Torah where Am Yisrael complain, and Moshe's embarrassed, and he's arguing against them and arguing in favor of them to God. And we have an instance where, as a result of the complaints, Moshe couldn't cope with all the negatives, and he appointed 70 of the Zakanim, of the elders, and Yeshua to help him with various other things that we won't go into, and Yeshua comes running in and reports that these 70 elders are prophesizing in the marketplace, and Yeshua comes running in with a complaint that Moshe was being usurped by these 70 elders, and Moshe has nachas from it. He says he wishes every member of Am Yisrael was a prophet. Now this exchange is heard by Moshe Rabbeinu's wife, Tzipporah, and his sister, Miriam. And when Miriam hears, and Tzipporah mutters, the details are unimportant, oy vey, poor women. Why poor women? Asks Miriam. She says, the husbands have stopped sleeping with their wives. And Miriam says, what are you talking about? Why? And Tzipporah says, because since Hashem appeared to Moshe, to my husband, he stopped sleeping with me, because after intercourse, you're tomei, you're impure. We haven't got time to go into that. It's got nothing to do with dirty. And in order to receive Hashem's presence, he needed to be pure. So women are Miriam's very shocked by this, and she says, but there are lots of people who receive prophecy, and that they sleep with their wives. What are you telling me about what are you telling me about Moshe? And Tzipporah and Moshe. So what was the reason? The reason was that Hashem appears to everybody else in the prophecy in different levels of concealment, but to Moshe Rabbeinu he appeared at a revealed level, whatever that means, and therefore Moshe Rabbeinu felt that he had to remain separate from his wife. Now, when Miriam heard this, she gossiped about it. Can you believe what my brother's done? He doesn't sleep with Tzipporah anymore. Why? Because he's it's not fair to Tzipporah. Now, for this, she was struck down with leprosy. It's translated as tsaras. It's translated as leprosy. Not really leprosy. It's a spiritual condition reflecting an energy that you can't measure as a punishment for Lashon Hara. punishment is a whole different thing in Yiddishkeit. You've got to understand. We learn punishment as a growth process. It's not that you go into the headmaster's office and he beats the hell out of you for being naughty or throws you into prison or to torture you. In our system, punishment is a pathway to growth. So she had, but to become pure again, she has to separate for 7 days, and it says that the whole of Am Yisrael waited 7 days for her to be clean again, and then they moved on. They were guided by the clouds and the pillar of clouds of glory and the pillar of fire and so on. So, how important is Lashon Hara that an almost trifling conversation needed the whole of Am Yisrael, 2 or 3 million people, to stop their progress through the Bamidbar, waiting for her to become clean again, because she was so badly afflicted by this. And of course, she must have grown through it, the process. Now, this incident, or this energy that we're describing, is so important that it's reflected in our davening. For those people that daven from the Siddur, you'll know that at the end of Shachris, 365 and a quarter days a year, Yontif, Shabbos, weekdays, we have the thing called the 6, not memories, remembrances. 6 is translated as the 6 remembrances. And let's do those 6 remembrances. The first one is, so let me explain. When we're talking about revealed and concealed energy, we're now talking about a super revealed structure of Yiddishkeit. Those six items in the list represent a total, brilliant, unbelievably deep explanation of what a Jew is, of how a Jew has to live. Everything. It's all contained in those 6 Zechariahs, the 6 remembrances. First one is, we have to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim, the exodus from Egypt. Why do we have to remember that? I'll just spend 2 minutes on explaining what I just said about this structure that we're talking about. Each one of us spends part of our lives constricted, whether it's constricted from outside or whether it's constricted from inside, whether the limitations are imposed on you or whether the limitations are imposed on you by yourself. We spend part of our lives battling constriction. And Yetzias Mitzrayim is the fundamental spiritual concept, not the revealed part, but the concealed part of Yetzias Mitzrayim is the koyach, the ability, the empowerment to break free of those constrictions. Whether those constrictions are physical or whether they... Now, sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's very difficult. Sometimes it's easy. It depends on everybody's position. It's the mantra that we go through so often. Every person is born with a set of nisyonos, a set of tests, and for that he's given certain koikas, he's given certain powers, and those powers he's got to use, if he's going to find success in his life, he's got to use those powers to deal with his nisyonos. And sometimes those nisyonos take the form of Mitzrayim, whether they're imposed from the outside or whether they're imposed from the inside. When that takes place, so we have the first of the remembrance that God says, you're a Jew, remember Yetzias Mitzrayim. You know how to do it. You know how to do it. So remember it. We've done it before. I've shown you how to do it. You know how to do it. Do it. That's number one. Number two is that we got the Torah on Mount Sinai. Am Yisrael got a present from Hashem. We were selected to be the Am Segula, which is not a matter of superiority. I keep saying it's a matter of responsibility, and we can have arguments about that other times, but just at the moment, the chosen people is a description of our responsibility. What's our responsibility? To bring Ruchnius into Gashmias and to elevate Gashmias into Ruchnius. To bring the spiritual down into the physical and elevate the physical into the spiritual. That's number two of the 6 remembrances. Hashem is saying, I've appointed you to do it. That's a serious responsibility. Go ahead and do it. Make sure that that's something that you remember every day, that that's an obligation to do. Now, number 3 is one I'm going to spend some more time on in a minute, but let me just list it here. It says we have to remember what Amalek did and destroy Amalek. Now, in the 6 remembrances, you've got to ask yourself the question, what's this doing here? I mean, how many Amalekites do you know? I mean, how do you, and not only do you have to remember it every day, but you got to, if you ever find one, you got to kill him. How many do you know? Is this is not even possible as a mitzvah, let alone, and so you have to ask yourself the question, why does God tell me every day after davening to remember Amalek and to eradicate him at some point of time? So the answer is that this is an energy that's concealed, not revealed. This is Amalek is, we'll come back to it in a minute, but Amalek is the whole cancer of doubt. It's a mental disease perspective that you take something of value and you disease it, you spoil it, and we'll come back to that in a moment. But that's number 3. Number 4 is that we have to remember the Egel Azov, the golden calf. Why do we have to remember the golden calf? Because God reminds us that we have got nothing to do with Avodah Zarah. Nothing. That means we don't believe in cash flows. We don't believe in universities providing us with a livelihood. We believe that God provides the livelihood. We believe that there are certainly actions which we do which facilitate Alpi Teva, according to nature, a facilitation of the brachas that we get. But we believe that our blessings come from God, not from silver, gold, whatever other, and that's very primitive, but there are sophisticated levels to that, and I won't spend time on it. We've done it many times before, but just to give an example, we learn that if you are angry with somebody else, this is a very sophisticated way of understanding that you're serving an idol. Why? Because if you really understand Betochen and if you really understand Ashkoka Prodis, we haven't got time to do it now. We've done it many times in one form or another, but if you really understand Ashkoka Prodis, the person that you're feeling angry with is only doing what he's programmed to do by Hashem. He's the mailman delivering the letter, and you don't beat up the mailman. You've got to go to the letter. So so Avodah Zarah is a very big and important part of this 6 sides to this description of Yiddishkeit. number 5 is that we have to remember this whole thing with Miriam and the Lashon Hara, which we've been through. And finally, we have to remember Shabbos. And we have to, Zohar and Shomer, and you have to remember it and guard it and keep Shabbos properly. And that's part of the life and breadth of every Jew. To whatever extent he does it, is the extent to which he can facilitate growth, spiritual growth. He doesn't do it, well, let's hope that he will learn. Certainly, the more he does it, the better his welfare will be. Okay. Now, of those 6 remembrances, we don't keep a Shabbos for any of them, except for one, and that's for Amalek. We have a special Shabbos designated for reading this remembrance. It's called Shabbos Zohar, and it's for Purim, and we read a special part of Torah. This is a mitzvah d'oraisa. This is from the Torah itself, and you have to say, well, wait a minute. Of this list of 6, Yitzias Mitzrayim, and getting the Torah, and not worshipping golden calf, and keeping Shabbos, and the story of Miriam, which we've already understood, the koyach of Lashon Hara. None of those things, which are actually the outside shape of Yiddishkeit, none of those things do we have a Shabbos for. A special Shabbos? You don't have a special Shabbos for Shabbos. So how is it possible that we have a special Shabbos for one of those, and that's the one that we've decided is the least relevant practically? Because you don't know any Amaleks. And if you did, you're seriously telling me you kill him, unprovoked? You'd be in trouble if you couldn't prove that he was an Amalek. So, why is that? Now, Chabad Hasidus says, first of all, this is a point at which we start. Jews who learn Chabad Hasidus start from this point. It must be critically relevant in some way. There are no accidents in Torah. There's no accidents in our observance of Torah. If Hashem gives us a specific mitzvah, there are a whole lot of implications with that mitzvah. Number one, you have to be able to do it. Correct? Otherwise, what's the point of commanding us to do something? Number two, you tell me it's difficult, who cares? If Hashem says to do it, we do it. So here we have a mitzvah which appears to be not only relevant, but impossible. So understand the depth of this. The depth of this is that the Rebbe's explained to us that we all have an Amalek in our heart and soul. Each one of us. And this is a potential cancer, God forbid, a spiritual energy which is negative. And it's a spiritual negative energy which is negative that, number one, we have to understand it, and number two, we have to eradicate it. So that's what it means so first of all, to understand it. What is this negative concealed energy? Amalek, I've said before, is the general concept of doubt, but specifically, it is this. And we're going to learn a bit of exciting Kabbalah for some people, might put some people to sleep in a minute, but just before we get there, what the problem with the concept of a Molech is that it's understanding God. In other words, a Jew is forming a relationship with God at one level. We'll come to what that level is in a minute. And a renunciation of his God at another level. That's the problem. The problem is, and we're going to do this by learning the letters in one of Hashem's names, Yud Kei Vav Kei, where, but before we get to that, it's this. Let's say that you start out on your journey to be a Jew. You weren't observant, you weren't brought up observant, in this example that I'm giving. And you were to some extent observant, and you stood by and watched your parents and your siblings and your best friends and your university pals, and you saw that they echoed an emptiness that you feel in yourself. And you think that emptiness can be cured by money, by pleasure, by power, by whatever means you're brought up erroneously to believe are the providers of happiness. And you find that as you get older, and let's say you're successful, they're not providing that. And this is when what was the name of that rock festival in the 60s? Woodstock. There's a Farbrengen from the Rebbe on Woodstock, where the Rebbe mentions Woodstock. And Woodstock at the time, and I remember it,
69.
Nearby, I remember it when it happened, and the kids were running wild. They were running crazy. Sex, drugs, rock and roll, with no limitations whatsoever. They were, and
Vietnam War as well.
Yes, the Vietnam War. And when the Rebbe spoke about it, you would think that the Rebbe would be thundering against these kids. And the Rebbe was saying how understandable it was that these kids were from the post-war generation whose parents thought that as they resettled into the United States, and the United States who provided their own kids, they were taught that the panacea of life was money, success, and they tried it, and it didn't work. And so some of them went touring the world to go to ashrams and sit on the top of mountains and smoke whatever they were and sit with their legs crossed and gaze into the distance and think that might do it. And many of these people who ended up in cults found themselves rescued by a Lubavitcher who brought them into. So the Rebbe was saying that these kids, you need to understand that the hopelessness that they feel is showing itself in the way they react in this concept. Now, what the negative energy of a Molech is, not that. It's the opposite of that. It's the knowledge of God and God's koyach and his supremacy in everything, that is totally satisfying, and rejecting it as rebelling against it and saying, no, I'm not going to do it. I understand it, but I'm not going to do it. The opposite of Nasa v'nishma, that when we got the Torah, we said, we're going to do it, and then we're going to understand it. Amalek says, we understand it first, and we're not going to do it. We're not going to do it. We're not going to make a dira b'taktoinim, for those that know what this is. They're not going to make a dira, but they choose not to. They know that they're supposed to, that they're on a plane. There's no one else on the plane that's looking. They from Jews, they keep kosher. The plane didn't load any kosher food. You forgot to take your sandwiches from home. You're sitting on the plane and you've got no food. So you think, well, maybe I'll order a vegetarian meal. But you know that the vegetarian meal isn't really kosher because you don't know what oils they use, whatever it is. So now what happens? Do you sit on the plane hungry because you love your God and you have a relationship with your God, and that relationship is feeding you to the point that you are blooming as a human being because of your relationship with your God? And the mitzvah system is, when it says schar mitzvah, that the reward of doing a mitzvah is a mitzvah, what it means, what happens to these kids that I'm using in this hypothetical example, they are flowering because of this. They appreciate this. They love their God for giving them this, but they're hungry. So now what happens? Some of them don't eat. So they're not committing the Avera of Amalek. Some of them do eat, but you've got an excuse. They're hungry. What do you want? It's a test that they fail. They'll do tshuva, God willing. You can't blame them so much, or can't blame them at all. But what about the guy who says, I know it's not kosher, and I'm going to eat it and love it? That's the disease of Amalek. That's the rebellion of Amalek. You know, a Jew's soul is made up of, I'm going to say something that's a bit harder. If it's too hard, just coast for a minute. A Jew's soul is made up of Hashem's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei. And from that combination, we have the 10 levels of the soul. We have 3 levels of the soul, which are intellectual and the rest are emotion, and 6 that are emotional, and 1 that is action. So for those who can read Hebrew, Yud Kei Vav Hei, Yud Hei Vav Hei is that's how you spell the name Yud Hei Vav Hei. You're allowed to use Hashem's name when you're teaching. So the Yud is a point. It's just a point. And the Hei is a spread out letter. So we learn that when a person uses their brain, they have a new idea. An example that I often use, because that's what I was given when I learned it the first time. Pretend you're a doctor in 1950 and you've got a general practice, and you notice that a lot of the people in your waiting room cough. And one day it occurs to you that a lot of those people that cough smoke. And you think maybe smoking and breathing problems are connected. Now, when you think that maybe they're connected, that's instantaneous flash. It's got no length and breadth and no study. It's an idea. And you think maybe there's a connection. Now, if you're going to be responsible with this, or if you want to go anywhere with this, you've got to test it. So you get your secretary to make a list of all the coughers and all the smokers, and you see what the correlation is, and to your surprise, you see that the correlation is much bigger than you thought, and you keep analyzing it until you finally come to a position where you're ready to make a pronouncement. You pronounce that there is a link between smoking and emphysema or lung cancer or whatever it is. Now I'll ask you, by the way, a $600 million question. Does that doctor who's a smoker, does he necessarily stop smoking? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. What does that mean? Okay, so the first flash we call Chokhmah. That's the first flash. The second process of coordinating the information, that's Bina. And the third thing of whether he stops smoking or not is Das, and let's leave that out of the equation for the moment. At the moment, let's deal with just the first two steps, which is the Yud, which is the flash, and the Bina, which is the Hey. The Yud and the Hey represent the initial flash and understanding the length and breadth of it. The last two letters of Hashem's name is Vov, which is a line that goes down, and another Hey, again spread out. The line that's going down is now it's explained in Hasidus, that is the process of emotion. That after getting the flash, processing the flash, coming to a conclusion about the flash, now there's emotion. Emotion is a result of seichel, of intellect, and you have that emotion. But with emotion, unlike intellect, you can be secluded and your intellect will work perfectly well. On the contrary, many people will find that their intellect will work better secluded. But emotion, you can't be secluded. You can't have kindness to someone that isn't there, or anger if there's nothing to make you angry, no other person to make. So you need something outside of yourself to generate your emotion. This is not well known. It should be taught to kids in school. Emotion is generated by an otherness. It's not generated by yourself. If you're generating it by yourself, it's because you're imagining some otherness. But you need otherness for emotion. And finally, when that emotion is activated, it brings action. So you see a desirable piece of chocolate cake and you do some mental work with it. If I eat that, I'm going to get fat. How much of it do I have to eat to get fat? That's the bina now. You do all of that. Then you've done all of that, but you look at the cake and it's generating, because it's something else, it's something outside of you, it's generating a desire to eat and gratify yourself. And now there's an action, if you eat it or you don't eat it. What the clipper, what the sin, what the, I hate that word sin, what the transgression of, what the disease of Amalek is. Not the Yud and the Hey, not the intellectual first flash to know God, not the Bina to work out the length and breadth of your relationship with your God. None of that, that's all okay with Amalek. The problem with Amalek is the last two letters. And how do we know this? Because there's a pasuk in Torah, which I could prove to you, but we haven't got time, where Hashem talks about lifting his arm and the kisei and the chair, and his name is written defectively. So how's it written defectively? Only the Yud and the Hey, not the Vav and the Hey. And that's when, and this is the clipper of Amalek, that you understand your God, and that's applauded by Amalek. Why? Because the more you understand him, the more your rebellion's worth. And what's the clipper of Amalek after? It's after understanding but disobeying. And that disobedience is fueled by a secret, a concealed energy of doubt. That you've been learning the same thing for years. You've believed it for years. You believe in kashrus. You believe that you don't eat milk after meat. And how is it possible that after all of those years, in certain circumstances, you fail? That's the clipper of Amalek. So why is it in the 6 remembrances? It's in the 6 remembrances because it's so important. Because it's assuming you've got a huge level of sophistication as a Jew. You understand that you've got a God. You understand that your life is going to be completely different if you have a real relationship with your God. You understand all of that, but you're prepared to throw it in the rubbish tin. How can you do that? Answer, that's the clipper of Amalek. And that's why it's in the 6 remembrances. And that's why it's in the 6 remembrances to the point that we have a special Shabbos isolated to remember it. When we don't have it for Yetzias Mitzrayim or Matan Torah, sure, we have Yom Tovim for that. Yeah. Huh? It's a yontif, but it's not something that we are commanded to remember every day. I mean, 365 and a quarter days a year, every day, if you daven from the Siddur. And if you don't, you'll start, God willing, at least with the 6 remembrances. So what's the bottom line? The bottom line for you and me is that there are many, many levels of energy that we don't deal with on a daily basis because we're struggling to deal with the revealed levels of energy. Learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. Let's talk about that. If you learn Torah, is that enough? The answer to that is no. The Friedrich Rebbe used to say, the action is the main thing. The trite example that is used over and over again is you have tefillin. There's so many secrets of Torah in relation to tefillin. The empowering of your life through physical action, which is symbolized by the shel yad, the tefillin that goes on your hand, and making your brain and your seichel and your intellect subservient to God. That's the shel rosh, the one that goes on your head. And they're very deep maimorim and sikhs about all of this. Now, I want to ask you, you're bocky in all of those sikhs and maimorim, right? You really get all of this, but you haven't put on film today. Do you have the mitzvah of film? No, you don't. And the guy who doesn't know any of that stuff, none of it, but he thinks, I have to put on film today, and he puts on film today, he has the mitzvah. So it's all very well to plumb the energies, but you've got to do the mitzvah. And what's the delight of the clipper of Amalek? That you don't do the mitzvah, that you don't actualize it into action. And if you don't actualize it into action, you're not bringing any ruchnius into Gashmis. You're not bringing any spirituality into the world. You're not adding a brick to Dira B'Taktoinim. You're just going for massage. And massage is probably very healthy. But that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about making a Dira B'Taktoinim with a massage. Dira B'Taktoinim is building the takton, building the levels of Gashmis. And the big enemy to that is the introduction of a decline to do it. And that's why it's in there. So we give each other a brocha that we don't fall for it. L'chaim, l'chaim. This mitzvah that we do together is becoming impossible. Who carries money? Do you still carry money?